The smell of boiling maize porridge filled the tiny kitchen, blending with the sharp scent of wood smoke. The dim lantern on the table flickered as a chilly breeze slipped through the cracks in the old wooden door. Miriam, her fingers rough from years of washing clothes in cold water, stirred the porridge with practiced precision. Her body ached from the day's labor, but she ignored the pain. She had more important things to think about, like feeding her son. Daniel sat at the wobbly wooden table, his eyes scanning his torn schoolbook. The words blurred slightly, not from exhaustion but from the hunger gnawing at his stomach. He tried not to think about it. He had learned long ago that complaining never solved anything. His mother always found a way to make sure he ate, even if it meant going without food herself. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the loose iron sheets on their roof. The sound had once frightened Daniel when he was younger, but now, at 14, he had grown used to the unpredictable wrath of nature. His fears had shifted, from storms to the unrelenting hardships that threatened to break his mother's spirit. Miriam turned off the small charcoal stove, wiped her hands on her faded wrapper, and carried the steaming bowl to the table.
"Eat, my son,"
she said softly, placing it before him. Daniel looked up at her, his heart heavy. He had seen her return home late that evening, her shoulders sagging under the weight of a sack filled with clothes to wash the next day. He had noticed how she had winced slightly as she bent down to remove her worn-out slippers. He had heard her sigh, deep and weary, when she thought he wasn't listening.
"Mama,"
he began hesitantly.
"did you eat today?"
Miriam smiled, the kind of smile that masked truth with love.
"Of course.
She lied easily.
I had some bread and tea at the market."
Daniel knew better. The last piece of bread had been his breakfast. He wanted to argue, to insist she take some of his food, but he also knew his mother. She would never accept it. Instead, he picked up his spoon and took a bite, the warm porridge easing the tightness in his belly. Miriam sat across from him, watching with quiet satisfaction.
"You have exams next week,"
she said, her voice gentle but firm.
"You must do better than I did."
Daniel swallowed hard. She had never told him much about her own schooling, only that she had left early to care for her younger siblings when her own mother had fallen ill. She had dreams once, dreams that life had stolen from her. But she had given those dreams to him instead.
"I will, Mama,"
he promised, his voice thick with emotion.
"I won't let you down."
Miriam reached out and smoothed his hair, her fingers lingering for just a moment.
"I know you won't,"
she whispered. Outside, the wind raged on. But inside that tiny home, a quiet fire burned, one of love, sacrifice, and unshakable determination. The morning sun rose sluggishly, casting golden light over the dusty streets as Daniel made his way to school. His uniform, though carefully washed and ironed by his mother the night before, was beginning to show its age, faded, the fabric thinning at the elbows. His shoes, once black, were now a dull shade of brown, the soles worn to the point that he could feel every rock and crack beneath his feet. But none of that mattered. What mattered was making it to school, staying awake through the lessons, and fighting through the hunger that gnawed at his stomach like an unrelenting beast. In class, he sat at the back, his second-hand textbook resting on the wooden desk. The pages were dog-eared, the cover barely holding together. Around him, other students flipped through their brand-new books, their well-fed bodies leaning back comfortably in their chairs. During lunch breaks, they opened their neatly packed meals, rice, stew, fruit, juice boxes, while Daniel sat quietly, pretending to be too focused on his studies to care. But he cared. He cared when his stomach groaned in protest. He cared when the teacher's voice blurred into nothingness because all he could think about was the hollow ache inside him. He cared when he caught glimpses of pity from his classmates, their whispers like knives slicing through his pride. One afternoon, as he walked home from school, his head heavy with exhaustion, he saw her, Miriam, standing by the roadside, a large basin of laundry balanced on her hip. Her body was thin, her eyes shadowed with fatigue, but when she saw him, she smiled.
"Daniel,"
she called, her voice as warm as ever.
Come help me carry these.
He hurried to her side, taking the heavier load without hesitation. The scent of soap clung to the damp clothes, mixing with the scent of the hot earth. They walked together in silence, their feet kicking up small clouds of dust. Inside their tiny home, Miriam placed the basin down with a sigh, rolling her sore shoulders. Daniel could see the way exhaustion clung to her, the way she moved just a little slower than before. That night, as she sat on the floor, patching up the frayed edges of his school shirt, Daniel finally spoke the words that had been burning inside him.
Mama, why do you work so hard for me?
Miriam didn't look up immediately. Instead, she finished tying a knot in the thread before setting the needle aside. Then she met his gaze.
Because you are my future.
She said simply, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 untold sacrifices.
If you succeed, then every tear, every sleepless night will be worth it.
Daniel clenched his fists. He had always known his mother worked hard, but hearing it in those words made his chest tighten with something fierce, something that felt like determination. From that night on, he changed. He studied harder, forcing himself to ignore the hunger, the exhaustion. He borrowed books from the school library, staying late to read under the dim, flickering bulbs. On weekends, he helped his mother at the market, learning how to count change, how to bargain, how to spot the customers who would try to cheat them. He promised himself, swore it in the depths of his heart, that one day his mother would never have to lift another heavy basin or scrub another stranger's clothes. One day she would rest. And that day would come because he would make it happen. The letter arrived on a rainy afternoon. Daniel had just come home from running errands at the market when he found his mother standing at the door, a thin envelope trembling in her hands. Her eyes were wide, her breath uneven. The rain dripped from the thatched roof, the sound filling the silence between them.
Mama?
Daniel asked cautiously, setting down the sack of vegetables he had been carrying. Miriam swallowed hard, gripping the envelope tighter.
It came.
She whispered. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. He knew exactly what she meant. The scholarship letter. The one he had prayed for, dreamed of, worked tirelessly for. His hands were shaking as he took the envelope from her. The paper was damp at the edges, likely from her nervous fingers. With bated breath, he tore it open, his eyes scanning the words as they blurred together in his excitement. Then he saw it.
Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship to the University of Ghana.
A strangled sound escaped his throat. He looked up at his mother, his vision swimming with unshed tears.
Mama! I did it!
Miriam let out a choked sob, her hands covering her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks.
My son.
She whispered, her voice breaking. And then, before he could react, she pulled him into the tightest embrace he had ever felt.
Oh, Mama, you are my light. You gave me wings, you taught me flight. Every tear, every fight, you built my world, you gave me life. Now I stand tall and free, and everything I am is 'cause of thee. Mama, you are my pride. There were nights she went.
Daniel felt her shoulders shake as she cried into his shirt, her frail body trembling with relief, joy, and overwhelming pride. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as tightly as he could. This was it. The years of hunger, the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the sacrifices, everything had led to this moment. The entire village heard the news by sundown. Neighbors stopped by to congratulate them, some with warm smiles, others with barely hidden envy. An old man patted Daniel's back, saying,
"You will go far, my boy."
But as the celebrations continued, Daniel sat quietly beside his mother, watching her as she wiped her eyes, her face still glowing with pride. He had made it, but this was just the beginning. The night before he left for university, Daniel found Miriam sitting outside under the old mango tree. The stars above them blinked like distant lanterns, and the air smelled of earth and home. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching.
You must be excited.
She said softly, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the ground. Daniel nodded.
I am. But I'm also afraid.
Miriam turned to him, her eyes filled with warmth.
Afraid of what, my son?
He hesitated, then sighed.
That I won't make it. That I'll fail. That everything you've sacrificed will be for nothing.
Miriam reached out and cupped his face in her hands, just like she had done when he was a little boy.
Listen to me.
She said firmly.
You are my son. I have seen you fight battles no one else could see. You are strong, Daniel. You will not fail.
He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, letting her words seep into his bones.
I will make you proud, Mama.
He whispered. She smiled, her tears glistening in the moonlight.
You already have.
And with that, the boy who once studied by candlelight, who went to school on an empty stomach, who watched his mother struggle every single day, was finally stepping into the future he had fought so hard for. But in his heart, he knew this victory was not his alone. It belonged to his mother, his pride. The wheels of the bus screeched against the dusty road as it came to a slow halt. Daniel pressed his forehead against the window, his heart pounding as he caught sight of the familiar landscape, the place that had shaped him, the place he had left behind. Home. He stepped off the bus, his polished shoes kicking up small clouds of dust. The air smelled of burning firewood, fresh earth, and the distant scent of rain. His breath caught in his throat as he saw her. Miriam. She stood a few feet away, her hands nervously clutching the ends of her wrapper, her once dark hair now streaked with silver. The moment their eyes met, a sob broke from her lips.
My son.
She whispered, taking slow, shaky steps toward him. Daniel swallowed hard. She looked smaller, frilier than he remembered, but her eyes still held the same warmth, the same quiet strength.
Mama.
He murmured, dropping his bag and rushing to her. She pulled him into a tight embrace, her fingers gripping the fabric of his crisp suit as though afraid he would disappear.
Mama, you are my light. You gave me wings, you taught me flight. Every tear, every fight, you built my world, you gave me life. Now I stand tall and free, but everything I am is 'cause of thee. Mama, you are my pride. There were nights she went.
Daniel buried his face in her shoulder, inhaling the scent of home, of love, of sacrifice, of everything she had given him.
You've grown.
She choked out, pulling back to cup his face.
Look at you. A man.
He smiled through his tears.
Because of you, Mama.
They walked home together, just like they had all those years ago. Except now, he wasn't the barefoot boy struggling under the weight of hardship. He was a man with a purpose. That evening, Daniel sat across from his mother at their worn-out wooden table, the same table where he had once eaten porridge on nights when food was scarce. Except this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. Miriam frowned, wiping her hands on her wrapper before taking it. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, her breath hitching when she saw what was inside. Money. More money than she had ever held in her life.
Mama.
Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion.
You will never wash another person's clothes again.
Miriam gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes as she stared at him in disbelief. He wasn't done. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another set of keys. Her gaze darted from the keys to his face.
Daniel, what is this?
He exhaled, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face.
Your new home.
A strangled sob escaped her lips.
No. No, Daniel,
He took her hands in his grip firm but gentle.
Mama, listen to me. All my life, I have watched you sacrifice everything for me. You have given me more than I could ever repay. But let me do this for you. Let me give you rest.
Miriam broke down, clutching his hands as she wept.
Oh, my son, my son.
Daniel felt his own tears fall, but this time, they weren't tears of struggle. They were tears of victory. For the first time in her life, Miriam wouldn't have to wake up before dawn to work. She wouldn't have to scrub strangers' clothes until her fingers bled. She wouldn't have to worry about where their next meal would come from. She would finally rest. And as she held onto her son, sobbing with gratitude, she knew this was the moment she had waited for. Her boy had not only made her proud, he had fulfilled a promise. The grand hall was filled with people, business leaders, scholars, journalists, and government officials. The chandeliers above sparkled like diamonds, casting a golden glow over the crowd. Cameras flashed, and murmurs of excitement rippled through the audience. But Daniel saw only one person, his mother. She sat in the front row, her hands clasped in her lap, her face calm but her eyes shining with pride. She wore a simple, elegant dress he had bought for her, the deep blue fabric complementing her warm brown skin. She was different now, not just because of the fine clothes or the comfortable life he had given her, but because for the first time in years, she carried no burden. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The applause was deafening, but his heart pounded louder. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began.
Ladies and gentlemen,
He said, his voice steady but filled with emotion.
I stand before you today as a successful economist, an entrepreneur, and a man who has defied the odds.
He paused, letting his words settle before he continued.
But before all that, I was a boy who studied by candlelight. A boy who went to bed hungry. A boy who watched his mother sacrifice everything just so he could have a future.
The room fell silent. He turned his gaze to Miriam, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold back her tears.
This woman
Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion.
is my mother. My pride. My strength.
A murmur of admiration spread through the crowd. Some people turned to look at her, their eyes filled with respect. But Miriam only looked at her son, her heart full.
I remember the nights she went without food so I could eat.
He said.
I remember watching her scrub other people's clothes until her hands bled. I remember hearing her cry when she thought I was asleep.
The weight of those memories pressed against his chest, but he did not waver.
She never gave up. She never let me feel like I was less than anyone else. She taught me that poverty was not an identity, but a circumstance. And she gave me the strength to change that circumstance.
A few people in the audience dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Others simply nodded, absorbing the depth of his words. Daniel took a deep breath, his hands gripping the podium.
Today, I run an organization that provides scholarships to children from struggling families. Today, I stand here as a man who can give back to the world because one woman gave everything to me.
He looked at Miriam again, his eyes burning with gratitude.
Mama, everything I am is because of you.
The room erupted into applause, but Miriam barely heard it. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she watched her son, a boy who had once sat at a broken wooden table eating porridge, a boy who had worn patched-up clothes to school, a boy she had carried on her back when his feet were too tired to walk, now standing before the world, declaring her as his greatest source of pride. She had dreamed of this moment, but never in her wildest imagination had she thought it would feel like this. As Daniel stepped down from the stage and walked toward her, the crowd still clapping, she stood up. He reached her, and without hesitation, he knelt before her. A collective gasp swept through the audience.
Now I kneel before your feet for all the love you gave to me. You held me up when times were tough. Mama, you have done enough. So rest your hands, dry your tears. Let me carry you for years and years. You raised a boy, you built a king, and now the world will hear me say.
Miriam let out a broken sob, shaking her head.
No, my son. No.
But Daniel took her hands, kissing them with deep reverence.
Mama,
He whispered, his voice raw with emotion.
I kneel before you because you are the reason I stand before them.
She pulled him up, holding his face between her hands, just like she had done when he was a child.
You were always meant to stand tall, my son.
And as she embraced him, surrounded by hundreds of people, she knew every struggle, every tear, every sacrifice had been worth it. She had given him the world, and now he was giving it back.
Mama, you are my light. You gave me wings, you taught me flight. Every tear, every fight, you built my world, you gave me life. Now I stand tall and free, but everything I am is 'cause of thee. Mama, you are my pride. Oh, yeah, Mama, you are my pride. Mama, you are my pride. Mama, you are my